Welcome to Mortification of Spin, a casual conversation about things that count, with Carl Trueman and Todd Pruitt, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. Let's join this week's conversation.
You are listening to Mortification of Spin. My name is Todd Pruitt. I'm with you as always with my friend Carl Trueman. I'm the pastor of Covenant Presbyterian Church in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and Carl is a professor at Grove City College, currently on loan to neighbors in the northern reaches of the Midwest at Notre Dame University. Carl, good to see you today.
Good to see you too, Todd. How's things?
Well, things are going well. As we are recording this, it's in January. I'm in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, which means our weather is, it's winter, but it's nice. Carl is somewhere in the middle of Lake Michigan somewhere, frozen over. I'm
Just
glad
to
I'm
the
not where
east
you
of the
are.
big one. Yes,
Yeah.
it's we're expecting, I think, 4 inches of snow in the next 12 hours. So, and it started.
Fantastic.
We've already got a covering. So,
Fantastic. Well, I want our listeners to know that this morning I was getting ready. I've spent the day so far in my study at home doing sermon prep. Man, I'm in the middle of Revelation chapter 13. It's thick with symbolism and the beast from the sea. And so, lots and lots of exegetical interpretive work. But I got up early this morning, rather blindly reached into one of my drawers and grabbed out a t-shirt, put it on, and lo and behold, whose face is staring back at me in the mirror, but that of Carl Trueman and my "Trueman is my homeboy" t-shirt, which we had manufactured way back in the day, back when you had hair,
back
back when
when
I
we
had
both
more hair
had
than I
hair,
do.
I think.
Yes, exactly. And I didn't really realize it was this shirt until a little bit after I'd put it on. I thought, well, you know what? We're recording today. Maybe this will give me some sort of extra inspiration. And
I hope so.
well, yeah, definitely.
I'm
I
an
need it.
inspiring guy. Come on.
I know, and I'm excited because today it's fortuitous that I put this shirt on because you're my guest today, Carl. You're not
I
just the
am.
co-host, but you're the guest. And the
I'm very
reason
nervous. You'll have to be gentle with me.
well, we typically, I'll let our listeners in on this. We typically reassure our guests that we don't do gotcha interviews. We don't bring people on, say, oh, we just really love your work. We want to have you on, and then spring all this aggressiveness on them. We don't do that, but I make no such promise today whatsoever. Well, the reason that I'm talking to Carl exclusively today is because let me see, we're recording this in January. It'll be several months, but Carl has a new book coming out. It's called The Desecration of Man: How the Rejection of God Degrades Our Humanity. And because I am a powerful, highly influential member of the media, I got an advanced readers only copy. It still has all the mistakes in it before your ghostwriter fixes it all. I'm teasing, of course, but I've been reading it, and unsurprisingly, I'm just fascinated, and I'm highlighting it up all over the place. It's extremely well done, and for those who might think, so does Carl just pick up where he left off with his previous books? Well, this is a different sort of thing. Certainly, Carl, you address some of the issues that have been front and center in the cultural debate over the human body, human identity, sexuality, gender, those kinds of things. But you take a particularly focused view on on the connection between how we understand the significance, the value, the dignity of the human person, and the necessity of how we think particularly about God. And though you write this book for a wider audience than just Christians. It's very clear, you make very clear very early that your presuppositions as a Christian very much frame what you have to say about why we say no to killing old people, or why we say no to destroying life in the womb, or why we say no to mutilating the bodies of healthy individuals. Is that a pretty good way to describe that?
Yes, I think it is. And I think the origins of the book really lie with two things. One, I was convinced that the tendency among some writers whom we've had on this program, Rod Dreher would be a good example, their preoccupation with the notion of disenchantment as a way of explaining the plight of religion in the current climate didn't go far enough. That disenchantment only explains a certain amount of what's happened in our society. And the example I use in the book is, if you look at abortion, the rhetoric surrounding abortion from the 90s of it should be safe, legal, and rare, that can be explained with disenchantment. I don't agree with that logic, but there's a sense in which,
Right.
okay, we live in a bad world. We got to do bad stuff on occasion. This is
Yeah.
the bad stuff we got to do. We don't like it, but it's important that we don't send people to prison for it. There's a big difference between that and what we see today in the sort of the celebration of abortion as a basic human right.
Shout your
Women
abortion. Yeah.
women wearing sweatshirts, proclaiming they've had abortions. The crazy case of the man who claimed to be a woman who wanted to have gender transition surgery so that he could get pregnant and have an abortion.
And have an abortion. Yeah.
That's going beyond disenchantment. So that was one aspect of the driving the book. The other aspect was this, that I think the time has come, given the interest of a lot of what we might call intellectuals suddenly in religion. We think of Ayaan Hirsi Ali, her husband Niall Ferguson, for example. The Mary Harrington, who's been on this program, Louise Perry, thinkers who were by and large, I would say, secular thinkers at one time, realizing that the secular project promises one thing but delivers the exact opposite.
Right.
Most obvious being, say, the sexual revolution. And Louise Perry has written very eloquently on this. The sexual revolution promised liberation for women. What it delivered was slavery for women.
Yeah.
That women have become objectified in a way that is unparalleled, certainly in recent history, if not in history, period. And I wanted to turn the tables on the revolutions of modernity and say, okay, getting rid of God, getting rid of the idea that we're made in the image of God was supposed to liberate us. Let's actually look in the areas of birth, reproduction, and death. Let's see how liberated we actually are as a result of the revolutions of modernity in those three fields.
Yeah. You mentioned Niall Ferguson, who is someone I really have enjoyed reading over the years. And, his metaphysical evolution, his conversion was a shock to me. Wonderful, but that one, boy, I mean, if and I always appreciated him. He's a great thinker. A lot of things that a conservative would agree with him on, or at least identify with him. He's very thoughtful but very cynical about religion, very much confirmed unbeliever. And to see the trajectory there has been remarkable. Another one that's been really interesting is Charles Murray, his latest book, about, affirming belief in God. Now, Murray was as cynical about religion as, this kind of conservative, but very anti-supernatural, anti-religious, very much confirmed in his atheism. Well, now he's coming out, he's declaring himself a theist. And as I was reading his book, I think to one of the points you lean into, simply being a theist, simply having now a more enchanted worldview is not going to get him far enough, though. I don't think he realizes it yet. but what he's striving for in that book, kind of this merest theism, isn't going to get him where he at least has some sense he needs to be getting.
Yeah.
And I think he'd be a good example of a guy who's got now finally a more enchanted,
Yeah.
a place for the supernatural,
Yeah.
worldview. But that alone is just not far enough. And it was clear as I was reading that book.
And
Yeah,
that's where I think the idea of desecration is so important. And
yeah.
ironically, the philosophical figure that I found most helpful on this is Friedrich Nietzsche in the
Mm.
19th century. Nietzsche is really wrestling with, well, how do we think about what it means to be human
Right.
after the death of God? The Enlightenment
Hmm.
puts God to death, but Nietzsche's beef with the Enlightenment is it doesn't follow through on that. It
Hmm.
continues to, if you like, to feed off the capital of Christianity in
Right.
terms of values, objective truth, etc., etc. It doesn't follow through on the revolution, and he makes an. I think in Nietzsche, what you see is that if you're going to get rid of God, you really do have to kill him.
Hmm.
And killing God is both a terrifying and an exhilarating thing. It's terrifying because it means you've got to be God yourself.
Hmm.
But it's exhilarating because, what greater buzz can there be as a human being than having the blood of God on your
Yeah.
hands?
Yeah.
And and I think desecration captures, that difference between the rhetoric of about abortion that I pointed to earlier. Desecration allows us to understand, why do we glory in this, I would say, destruction of humanity? Well, the
Hmm.
answer is, well, humanity is made in the image of God. And surely there is nothing that makes us feel more godlike,
Hmm.
ironically, than the destruction of God's image. So abortion, euthanasia, these are things that they have an exhilarating appeal. The good news, of course, is that if desecration is the problem, then the answer is consecration. And that's
Hmm.
where Christianity comes in, because, if the problem's disenchantment, well, the answer is reenchantment. Well, reenchantment might be as simple as, reading Tolkien and just feeling that the world is a bit more mystical and a bit more exciting than you'd been sociologically conditioned to accept. And it may be a little harsh, but that's sort of where I'd put Charles Murray at this point.
Hmm.
I think his rather thin theism is
Right.
he just wants the world to be a bit more magical.
Yeah.
Whereas I would
Yeah.
say, as a Christian, no,
Yeah.
it's not a question of re-enchanting the world. It's a question of reconsecrating
Yeah.
humanity, and we do that through the church, the gospel.
Hmm.
Proclaimed in the church is the way by which human beings are consecrated, not
Yeah.
merely re-enchanted.
Right. It's interesting. Richard Dawkins, made headlines recently because he actually called himself in an interview a cultural Christian. He actually used that terminology. Now, Dawkins is a confirmed atheist. He's pro-abortion. Um, but what's interesting is that he has said, and I'm paraphrasing him, but that he finds comfort in Christian traditions. He finds comfort in even an evensong service. He finds comfort in the ancient Christian Christmas carols. He's much more in favor or comfortable with the idea of having evangelical Christians as neighbors than Islamists as neighbors. He feels safer being walking down the street with practicing Christians around him. And yet he wants to kill God. But
Yeah,
but he wants the capital that comes from people who really do believe in God, and not just God in general, but in the Christian God. Like he's all but
yeah,
said that.
yeah,
Give me
yeah,
Christian neighbors rather than Islamic neighbors. Like he is, he can say all he wants about, well, how do you know it's just not the flying spaghetti monster in which he engages in terrible philosophy. But where it comes down to it, when he's on the street at night, he wants those other people to be Christians.
yeah. And Nietzsche would point his finger at Richard Dawkins and say,
Exactly.
"You are exactly the problem.
Right.
You want the cultural capital." So you're going to keep going through the motions of the cultural capital long after you've torn away its foundations.
Hmm.
Nietzsche would say, "Do you have the courage to
Hmm.
rise up to the challenge that you have posed yourself?" having killed God, are you willing to step in and be God yourself? And the answer with Dawkins is no, he's not. And of course, his objection to transgender things. I mean, many of us would say amen. But my pushback on Dawkins would be, so why do you make the sexed nature of the body so authoritative? There are many things in nature that we simply regard as problems to be overcome. If we have a desert, we irrigate it. If I'm diagnosed with cancer, I get treated to destroy those things that are perfectly natural phenomena in some ways. Cancer, from Dawkins' perspective. Why do we arbitrarily make the sexed nature of the body the teleological authority, given the fact that body's just a lump of animate meat at the end of the day? Why can't we use our wills and our technical prowess to overcome that? And I actually don't think that Richard Dawkins is deeply read enough in philosophy and theory even to understand that challenge. I think he's operating with a very common sense. Hey, look, it's of course men are men and women are women. Well, that doesn't really get to the root of the problem, which is, why do we define these terms the way we do, and why do we give them the freight and authority that we give them? A scientist can merely describe or explain in terms of efficient causality the way the world is. The scientist has to step out from his specific scientific remit in order to talk about how the world should be.
And that's a dangerous thing for the atheist to do. Like, that's dangerous for their atheism. To move beyond just simply a biological explanation, to begin then asking the question why. And I think that's what's behind the conversion of some of these other public intellectuals that we've mentioned. Some of them we've had on the program, who've moved from, in some cases, radical, campus kind of feminism, to being sort of religious but not spiritual, to then becoming members of a church. It's been in the crisis that these questions have, it threw their atheism into a crisis.
I mean, I remember seeing Mary Harrington, who kindly provided a jacket commendation for this book. Mary, a few years ago, before she came on this program, was on with Glenn Scrivener, a Christian podcaster in the UK, and he sort of asked her, I think at some point he basically says to her, hey, Thomas Aquinas, or I think it was Thomas Aquinas, he mentioned, he does this stuff so well, why don't you cite him? And her answer was, well, if I start citing people like Aquinas, no secular person's going to take me seriously. I hope I'm not misrepresenting the conversation. That's my recollection of it. But Mary herself has moved significantly. She did a very beautiful, I think I sent it to you, Todd, her Substack. She did this beautiful meditation on Christmas and the Incarnation. And I'm thinking, wow, this is not, I've always loved Mary's work, but this is a different, not just a different tone, it's a different content. And I've not talked about this, but I wouldn't mind betting that it's the need for a kind of moral realism that has really driven people like Mary Harrington, people like Louise Perry, to take very seriously the claims of Christianity. I mean, I think I cite this in the book, but some years ago, my mind started to think along these lines when I was on the Trigonometry podcast in the UK with Konstantin Kissin and his friend. And they're a couple of fun guys. Unfortunately, they used rather profane language in the interview, so Crossway were not able to use it for publicity purposes, I think. But I went on their program, and they're a couple of secular guys. Certainly then they were secular guys, and at some point they asked me, can you build a moral society without belief in God? And what was interesting was that they asked the question in all seriousness. If I'd been on a podcast 10 years ago and I was asked that question, it would have been a rhetorical question designed to set me up for a takedown. Here was a couple of secular guys interested in hearing a religious person give an answer. And I see that Konstantin Kissin has actually been on the Colson Center's new
Yeah,
movie about truth.
that's right. And it's really interesting because there again is another guy who, because of this crisis, these metaphysical questions being forced, you
Yeah,
know, gratefully forced upon us, he's a perfect example of another guy who's really bright,
yeah,
who has gone from very much kind of a cynical atheist to asking questions sincerely that he was not several years ago.
yeah, yeah. And I would say to anyone listening today, we live in very interesting times.
Mhm.
They may not last. They may come to nothing.
Right.
But it would be a shame if we didn't grab all the opportunities that come
Yes.
our way. And one of my burdens in this book is I wanted to write a book that a secular friend could read, maybe not necessarily agree with me at the end, but at least say, okay, Trueman's put his finger on two things.
Mhm.
He's put his finger on a cultural problem. It's difficult to build a moral universe without some kind of metaphysics grounded in a belief in
Mhm.
God. And secondly, that what we're seeing at the moment has such an outrageous quality to it that it
Mhm.
isn't simply the result of a process of disillusionment. There is an active will involved in us riding a coach and horses, really
Mhm.
through what it means to be human, which for me is what it means to be made in the image of God.
Right. You mentioned earlier, just a few moments ago, that article that you sent me from Mary Harrington. And one of the things that occurred to me when I was reading that was that what she's writing here is not mere sentiment on the one hand. And on the other hand, it's not something that you can just chart, you know, on the basis of chemical makeup or that sort of thing. It's a what I thought when I was reading that was this is the persuasive beauty of Christian theology, the persuasive beauty of the biblical witness of the need of man and the provision of God in the incarnation. And while we would look at that and say it's entirely logical, it makes logical sense to us. There's an orderliness to it that's reflective in our experience, but then there's also this kind of ineffable beauty to it, which also is persuasive. It's not the only thing. We like that it's logical too. We like that it makes sense out of our experience and out of the world. But there is also this ineffable quality of beauty to the Christian understanding of God, of man and his need, and of God's answer to that need in the gospel. And I that went through my mind as I was reading that, and the necessity of that, kind of metaphysical
Yeah.
component of it. And I think that's, a big reason why we see a number of these atheist public intellectuals who are going through a crisis. Some having already converted, some somewhere on that path, because they're
Yeah.
being confronted with that truth that resonates in a deep place, that's hard to define sometimes, but is real.
Yeah. Well, I think it's becoming patently obvious that the revolutions of modernity, for want of a better phrase,
Yeah.
have proved in the long run to be fundamentally dehumanizing.
Hmm.
And because we are human beings, because we're made in the image of God, we, at least most of us, intuitively grasp that there's something amiss in that.
Hmm.
Very, very few people, short of psychopaths that you meet, have no moral compass. We may
Right.
disagree on the details of morality, but by and large, there's a sense in which we understand that other human beings are to be treated as persons, not things.
Yeah.
How do we ground that?
Yeah.
Well, ultimately, I think you have to ground that in a notion that human beings are made in the image of God.
And I'm on my knees looking for the answer. Are we human or are we dancer? Will your system be alright when you dream of home tonight? There is no message we're receiving. Let me know, is your heart
Thanks for listening to Mortification of Spin, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. For more on topics like this, visit mortificationofspin.org, where you can find other articles by Carl and Todd, browse the archive of past episodes, and make a donation. We'll talk to you next time on Mortification of Spin.